Obsessions and compulsions have stepped to the forefront today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Talking like OCD?
Yeah, we're talking like OCD. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Stepping Out of Stuck. I'm your host, Bonnie Brindle, the Anxiety Avenger.
And I'm your host, Ted Simmons, the superhero of Shyness.
And together, we help you
to get unstuck.
So let's get after it. I have to say that OCD has been part of my experience. Has it been part of yours as well?
I always think that with Shyness, you always have some little bit of OCD, just because of how you have to, you set up rules for protecting yourself.
Oh, yes.
And
Sure.
so I would assume that that's part of OCD.
Yeah, that's going to be obsessive. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, this is a subject right now because I did a little bit of writing about this just the other day. It came to my mind as a type of anxiety. Like somebody asked me recently, well, what does anxiety look like exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I could spend an awful lot of time answering this question. And so I started just by writing a little piece on LinkedIn, a little thing in my newsletter about OCD. And I focused particularly on hand washing because a memory came back to me from when I was a teenager, and I had a friend named Bree who was a compulsive hand washer. At that point, I couldn't label that. I didn't know why she was doing that or what was going on. But I remember really noticing that she would wash her hands repeatedly and they were dry and cracked, and her knuckles would get bloody sometimes. And I didn't talk to her about it, but I really remember noticing it and wondering what would drive her to do that. And then, fast forward years later, years into my own life, recognizing my own OCDs, my own obsessions and compulsions that I think I developed to protect me from thought patterns that I couldn't leave alone, or the anxiety that was really strong in me when I was struggling with panic disorder and agoraphobia. And I found a couple of these OCD behaviors in myself. And I know that sometimes OCD can be the hand washing thing, right? It can be rituals of any kind. It can be things like you leave the house and you think you think you've left the stove on. So you have to go back and check and recheck and check, right? That kind of thing is common. Some people with OCD get stuck in counting, like looking at numbers and counting things. And one of the things I've done is counting. I remember I used to do this to soothe. It's like a self-soothing. That's it. The obsession and the compulsion is self-soothing, but it's also stressful because you can't stop doing it. Right.
Interesting.
But I would in my head count, think of a phrase and count the syllables in words and how they break down and how many syllables in a phrase. I mean, these thoughts that people would think oh, really? That's what you were thinking about? But I was using it to avoid thinking about other things I didn't want to come into my head.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So something that from my childhood that happened was when I was really, I had a friend that went through and called me a name, and it made me super self-conscious about how I was talking and how I looked. And that made me get into a period of time when I was going through and I was saying something out loud, and then I'd go back and I'd whisper it out.
Whisper? You'd whisper the same things that you said out loud?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was you do it in a repeated pattern?
Yeah. It would basically be anything that I went through and I said, I would basically go through and whisper it back to myself. And people would see my mouth moving. Basically, because I was so worried about, did I get what I wanted to say across? is there anything they can pick on me with about it and everything like that? It was just, it was, it took me a while to get over it.
Wow. Okay. And we've talked before about one of our previous episodes when we talked about the difference between shyness and anxiety, and how shyness is always a social construct. It's always around what other people see and perceive and judge,
Mhm.
right? So you would say it something out loud and then you would replay it in a whisper to yourself, like you're
Yeah.
almost checking for where somebody could come in and get you, where somebody
Mhm.
could find a flaw. Was it like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that is where a shyness becomes an anxiety, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. That is definitely anxious behavior, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and came from being shy
Mhm.
because you were afraid you were going to say something that was going to be misconstrued or judged poorly, and you'd be attacked for it, right? Verbally or in
And
some
that kind of fits into the OCD piece, right?
yeah.
That's, can, obsessing over, did I say the right thing? Being compulsive and repeating it,
Yeah.
yeah.
That really does. And that reminds me of another super common OCD behavior so many people do, and I have certainly done, is repeat, not whisper out the way you described it, but just repeat conversations that we've had in our heads that were maybe energetically charged in some way.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
like hear what we've said and hear what that other person said kind of over and over and replay it. You use the word replay, and that sparked me. Um, yeah, I remember talking with someone about this some years ago, and a gentleman who said that the conversations that are hard for him replay in his head like tapes,
Mhm.
like things that he would hear his father say to him that were negative, that were over and over and over. And so when somebody would attack him verbally, he would not just absorb it, but drive himself with it, repeatedly saying it to himself in his head.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there besides you and me who carry this stuff in our heads and others don't
Yeah.
know it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That makes sense.
just trying to stay safe.
I mean, that harkens back to what we talked about last time about oversharing, right? Um,
Oh,
going through and downloading every single little bit of information that you can to the other person. Um, that seems to me to be another obsessive compulsive type thing.
yeah, right. So, what would be behind the compulsion to overshare, like download info, or even if it's like over explaining? Sometimes when we've dealt with a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure from other people,
Hmm.
when we're put on the spot, right? You ever done this when you put on the spot and you over explain in order to like make sure you cover all the bases so you don't get
Right.
attacked like that? Like what's the
I think you
compulsion
nailed it right
behind?
there. Yeah. I think you nailed it right there with trying to make sure that everybody knows what you know, right? Or try to prove that you're super smart, or try to try to you know show something, right?
Mhm. Wow. Yeah. So I see like the oversharing is trying to prove that you're smart and you have the answers.
Mhm.
And that I came forward when I said that because oversharing is like, here you go.
Yeah.
Right. But
Fun fact.
fun facts. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you got an hour for my fun facts? And I'm going to lay all over you. But the protective over explaining makes me go like this.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going to make sure that, you're telling me that I'm wrong or you're judging me
Right.
somehow. So this is why I did this. And then I did this and I did it to prove, like, for safety's sake, I think.
Mhm.
And I hear people do this quite a bit. Like, it's just make sure you cover all the bases so nobody can smack you in the head. You put it, but yeah. So oversharing feels like this to me,
Mhm.
and yeah. Oh my goodness,
Mm.
OCD. I got to tell you a really quick story.
Okay. Yeah.
This has lived in my head since I was 25 years old.
Mhm.
That was a while ago. I lived across the street from a gentleman who had a little sports car. And I would see him sometimes come in or out of the house. You leave the house in the morning, go to work, come home in the evening, right?
Mhm.
His OCD was so severe. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's probably not getting any help. He's probably really alone with this. But it showed up in the physical ritualistic behavior. In the morning, he would leave the house, he would shut the door, start down the stairs, turn around, go back up, go back in the house, come back out, lock the door, down the stairs, back up, check the lock on the door, down the stairs, like 4 or 5 times before he even approached the car.
Mhm.
And then he would open the car and get in, and I could hear, it was a 5-speed. I could hear him moving the gears through and through and through and through
Okay.
before he would leave. And then coming home at the end of the day,
Mhm.
it took him like 20 minutes to leave the car because he kept playing with the gears, and then he would lock it, walk away, come back, check the locks, go up the stairs, come back. I mean, I just thought this poor gentleman.
Oh, wow.
And if this is happening to him at different degrees, it's happening to lots of people,
Mhm.
right? Who have maybe had some type of trauma in their earlier years or even their childhood, or, been taught that to be fearful, that something terrible is going to happen, right? But yeah, I used to look at him and think, how in the world does he even, I assume he was going to a job because he had kind of the same hours. How did he even function in a job all day when that kind of perfectionism and rechecking, compulsive
So
behavior? I couldn't even imagine.
does that get into like there's so I know in shyness you're basically protecting yourself, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so wouldn't that be like he's running through things over again, sort of like the re-speaking something with a whisper, that he's re-speaking that or he's redoing that so that then he feels safe?
It totally is about feeling safe, right? If the house door isn't locked, but it's so much more physical,
Mhm.
right, than just mental and emotional. Like when you were talking about repeated what you were saying, these are physical, ritualistic activities. It's
Mhm.
like the house has to be locked, the car has to be in the right gear, the
Right.
car has to be locked. The huge what if of all of that, like what'll happen if I don't get it right?
Right.
Had
And
to.
it's almost like rules to live by, right? I mean, you set in rules in stone that you have to do this so that then you can you can be safe, right? And that was one of the things I worked on with shyness, was that I had to rewrite my rules so that then I could overwrite what my rules for safety were and realize that there were new rules for safety.
Can you give us an example of an old rule that was really dysfunctional that you kind of rewrote into something that makes more sense now to you?
Well, with shyness, it was basically, you're hiding, you're trying to be invisible, right?
Mm,
And so one of the ways in the classroom was basically make yourself as small as possible, make sure you're not noticed, sit in the back of the class, not bring attention to yourself in
mm.
any form or fashion. And to rewrite that, what I did is I sat in the front of the class and I raised my hand, even if I didn't know the answer. And that finding out that that wasn't bad all the
Mhm,
time, and
mhm.
that was actually um, something that didn't kill me, didn't hurt me, didn't do something like that to me. That made it safe again, right? It made it safe in a different way.
Yes, I can see how it would make you feel safe in a different way.
Yeah.
About how old were you when you first started to take steps like that? Like, okay, I know being in the back of the classroom, this is not functional. I'm going to go push myself a little bit by sitting in the front and raising my hand, even if I don't know the answer. Like, what age were you at when you
That
started?
that I started doing that in high school. It was the first day of high school. I decided that I'd be, yeah, it was in the school had moved to a new location. Um, and, I was dealing with new students and new teachers and everything like that. And I was like, hey, what a great opportunity to change everything.
Oh,
Nobody necessarily knows who I was, or the last time they saw me was previous, before the summer break, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I have an opportunity to change everything. Why not?
Wow. Wow. That's ambitious and brave and well timed, right? Because it wasn't all the same kids that you'd hung out with in middle school or junior high, right? That makes good sense. And it takes that push on ourselves a little bit to try it, right? To
Mm-hmm.
get out there a little, to
Mm-hmm.
try to change the behavior. Hmm. I was just just thinking about something else that's an OCD for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not hand washing, toothbrushing.
Toothbrushing. Okay.
Toothbrushing. Yes, because I didn't brush my teeth many, many times over in a day, like some
Mm-hmm.
people probably do, and some people
Mm-hmm.
do when they're talking about hand washing. But I had such a compulsion for my teeth to be super clean that I would brush them way too hard,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Right? And I actually did some damage to my gums.
Mm-hmm.
Like people sometimes have some recession in their gums from that, from
Mm-hmm.
really beating them up. And when I think of you like taking a step to sit in the front, raise your hand, I'm like, how did I stop doing that? Because I did. Oh, thank goodness. Um, how did I stop doing that? Well, I started taking a step to using a really soft toothbrush and just trying once a day
Mm-hmm.
to brush really carefully. And this was before electronic toothbrushes was super popular,
Mm-hmm.
right? That I started to work with this. And I didn't realize until a dentist told me quite a bit later. I wish I'd heard it earlier, but when electronic toothbrushes came out, that they can help you prevent beating your teeth too much because they kind of consistent way of moving, and that
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot too. But I had to really think like you did about, okay, I'm going to take this step
Right.
to go forward. I'm going to sit in the front. Now I'm sitting here in the front.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to raise my hand even if I don't know the answer right now.
Right.
Yeah, it was actually like a step for me to use a softer toothbrush and and then try to do that more often during the day.
Okay. So to kind of summarize this for people,
Yeah.
OCD is basically obsessing over things
Hmm.
and getting a compulsion of things,
Yes.
which to me sounds a lot like rules that you've put around something. And if you can go through and you can figure out what that rule is, then you can figure out what the opposite of that rule would be and challenge yourself into doing that opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're making me think like we talk about yeah, on all our episodes is what's the hidden rule behind this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, you sure were. And
Yeah.
I'm totally unprepared. So let me think for just a second. Well, because the OCD things, the OCD behaviors and obsessions and then
Mm-hmm.
compulsions are action, right? Thinking and
Mm-hmm.
action. Um, were so varied for me.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot on the inside of my lip. You'll see people do this. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was a big lip chewer. I still
Yeah.
have to watch out for that. I still struggle with that sometimes. Playing with the syllables in words, right?
Mm-hmm.
My angry, hard toothbrushing that I had to take back.
Right.
Um, oh my gosh, those are all such different behaviors, but there's an overarching hidden rule behind OCD.
Well, wouldn't it just be like with your toothbrushing piece? It's basically, you know, taking an idea, realizing that you were doing that,
Hmm.
right? That's the first step.
Yeah.
And then figure out why you were doing that, which is to have clean teeth, right? And then
Yes.
to figure out how do you change this behavior so that then it makes your teeth clean and gives you that clean feel, but doesn't hurt your teeth.
Right. And I need to go back to the second part, when you was like, well, this is because I wanted clean teeth, which I did.
Yeah.
But why was I doing that? Why was I doing it at that level?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Why am I taking apart all these phrases and playing with their syllables? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is a way to stop. Okay, here it comes. The hidden
Yeah.
rule. If I do things to the nth degree,
Mm-hmm.
if I brush my teeth this well,
Mm-hmm.
if as a person who's really into language and later on an English teacher for a long time, if I understand how all the words are structured, it'll stop whatever else is coming into my mind right now that I don't want to deal with. Bad memories, fears,
Mm-hmm.
feeling incompetent, imposter syndrome, like I can't make it, I can't do it, it won't work out.
Oh.
The criticism that I dealt with as a kid, the constant criticism from my parents, my mom
Mm-hmm.
especially, um,
So
that's
in
what
a way, you were using that to protect yourself from the other thoughts that were coming in.
exactly. That's the hidden rule.
Wow.
The more I obsess on this thought,
That's
the more I do this compulsive action, the less this stuff behind me that feels like it's chasing me can get me. Whew.
nice. Nice. I like that one. That one probably is. I mean, that probably covers a lot of people.
It's probably universal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wow. Let's close this up. Anything else you have to say about OCD?
Just one thing.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're realizing that you have some OCD habits that are negatively affecting your life, first of all, give yourself some grace. You're doing that to protect yourself on some level. It's old survival, like everything else we've talked about, right, Ted? These are old survival strategies,
Mm-hmm.
right, that are no longer helpful
Mm-hmm.
in our current lives. And that we can start to take them apart. Once we have the understanding, we can start taking them apart a step at a time. But we have to be able to recognize that and admit that to ourselves. Like this thing that I do that I think is so great, maybe isn't so great for me.
Right.
I think that's kind of the takeaway from it is I'm pretty sure most of us have some level of OCD. Yeah. Just being controlling and like people could say workaholic, behavior. Someone who's constantly working and focused on all that stuff is OCD behavior. And it's, trying to protect ourselves from something bad happening. It's not going to happen. It might have happened in the past. Doesn't mean it has to happen now.
Well, on that note, we should tell the listeners to go through or the watchers and listeners to go through and make notes in the comments. Tell us about your own OCD or other things that you would like to hear on future episodes.
Great. All right. I can't wait to see what people bring to share with us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be their own, but anything they've witnessed in another person and thought, what? Why do they do that? Let's see what we might get in the comments. All right. Great to see you guys. Thanks you were here. See you soon.